Good morning, class. My name is Tyler. I'm going to be teaching the class today. Today we're going to learn about fleet motor safety. The purpose of this training is to make drivers of fleet motors aware and how to be prepared for multiple hazards such as weather, bad tires, bad drivers, slick conditions, etc. that come along with driving for a company. When driving for a company, the insurance has to be provided by the company for all of their vehicles. This can range from a company car to a pickup truck, and even to an 18-wheeler, or even a cement truck. No matter the situation, every person must be aware of the different hazards that may arise while driving. When driving, the driver is responsible for daily inspections to make sure the vehicle is running properly. The purpose of this class today is to learn about the inspections that we need to do. These will include, but are not limited to, fuel, coolant, engine oil, transmission fluid, and brake conditions. The conditions of your fleet are an important factor while driving on a highway. The next thing we need to be aware of is the weather. Weather can make driving conditions less safe than a person may like, but sometimes we have to work in all conditions. If this is the case, it would be recommended to understand the safety precautions that can be taken to prevent accidents and injuries. It is also a good idea to look into conditions of all the places you may be traveling to. Especially if you're traveling far or traveling overnight, you definitely need to be aware. In thunderstorms, it's better for drivers to drive kind of slow. The visibility is hard, and we need to make sure when we're driving in a rainstorm, we're being very cautious of not just ourselves, but others that are driving on the road as well. Snowy conditions can be a bad thing. We're going to discuss one way that we can kind of fight against it. It's not going to protect us 100%, but it'll get us through the snow. The training objectives for this class is going to be know how to properly check fluids, to be able to properly inspect lights and warning lights, the proper inflation levels when driving, determine safe weather driving conditions, and if bad weather can be avoided, they will know the precautions they need to take. If you'll see your handout, I got an inspection list. I'll show that right there. Everybody should have one. This is kind of for many different types of vehicles, but this is what the company will use. So right now we're going to go off to a video on how to start our inspection. This video is going to show you how to check your belt, power steering fluid, your brake fluid. You want to check your pulley system, make sure everything looks good. You want to know which dipstick is your oil, which is transmission fluid. Oil is going to be yellow, transmission fluid's in the back. We want to check our engine coolant levels to make sure they're the right level so we don't mess up our engine. We're going to move to checking the transmission fluid. You always want to check the transmission fluid with the engine running. It needs to be at full temperature, full running temperature. You take it out, clean it off, put it back in there, and then we'll get our reading. There's a hot and cold reading on it. You want to look for the hot one. The engine is running. The cold reading is not as accurate as the hot reading. We'll get a close-up on that, try to see if we can show you what it looks like. But as for this fleet, the transmission fluid levels are where they need to be, so we are good to go. We'll clean off the dipstick because of dirt and debris. We don't want that going back into our fluids. And then we'll put our dipstick back in. Next, we move on to checking the oil. Same thing. You want to pull it out, clean it off. You want to check your oil with your engine turned off. It needs to be cooled off for about 5 minutes. We're going to reinsert our dipstick, pull it back out, and we're going to check our engine oil levels. Most engine dipsticks, they're easy to read. You can tell if you're low on oil or whatever. We need to get any type of fluids back into the vehicle that we need, so that way it's running at the right rate that it needs to be. As you can see from the short video, which tells you how to check your transmission fluid, your oil, and your engine coolant. You also want to make sure you have enough brake fluid and enough power steering fluid. That can play a big factor whenever you're driving and conditions aren't quite as you expect them to be. All right, next we're going to talk about tire pressure. Visual aid for This is a tire gauge. Not all tire gauges look like this. This one's just a little different than most. You walk around, you check your tires, make sure they're all at the right pressure. The right tire pressure for a light truck is between 35 and 40. It ranges depending on what you're doing. The heavier loads you're carrying, you may want to have higher pressure. Especially you want to have higher pressure whenever the storms get bad as well, because low tires can cause accidents just as well as just the road being slick. This next video we're going to show you how to check the tires, and it also shows a part where sometimes, you know, some vehicles, they tell you the tire pressure. We don't always want to go by those. Here's that video. This video is going to show you how to check your tire pressure. We'll remove the cap, take our pressure gauge and put it on the valve stem, take the pressure of the tire. If it's good, we'll move on to the next. You always want to make sure you check all 4 tires. If there's one low tire, it can cause an accident, especially if you're carrying heavy freight. We want to make sure we get those tires aired up before we go anywhere. This tire is showing a PSI of 30. It's going to need some air. So hopefully if you have some air around the shop or wherever you're at, you can get those tires aired up before you move the vehicle. We'll move on to the next tire. Same thing. Check the pressure on it. That one's a little low as well. As you can tell from the tires in the video, they're not in the best of shape. Those will need to be replaced, especially if you're going to be carrying heavy freight. At the time of the video, the tires just have not been replaced yet. After all 4 tires are checked, we make sure you get the proper air inflation, and then we'll be ready to drive. In this video, we show you that the truck sometimes can show you the tire pressure. We don't always want to go by that. It's never always right. That's how you're going to check your tires. We always want to make sure our tires are looking good, especially whenever we travel. We also want to check the tread on our tires while we're checking them. If tread does not look good, we need to make sure that we're letting the bosses know so we can get the tires changed as soon as possible to prevent any hazards. The next, we're going to move on to our safety lights. We always want to make sure all safety lights are working. It's a good thing to do those every single day. You don't want to be somewhere trying to go in reverse light's not working, nobody can tell that you're going backwards. Some vehicles are supposed to have alarms, but most light trucks or small motor fleet, they're not going to have those beeper alarms on them. Some of them do, but not all. In the next video, we're going to show you how to check your lights. The next thing we want to check is we want to check all of our lights, blinkers, bright lights were working. Move around to the back. You always want to have somebody with you so we can make sure if there's any lights out, we can get them replaced. It's hard to do by yourself. You're going to check your brake lights, hit them twice. Blinkers. Then you would check, see if your license plate lights are working. Alright, so that's how you're going to check your lights. If there's any lights out, when you get those changed as soon as possible. Usually your manager will get with you, or you can get with your manager, and they'll get that changed for you, usually pretty quick. The next thing we're going to cover is bad weather. And being a driver, you always want to be aware of the bad weather. Yeah, it's part of the job, but you want to know what you're going to be driving into. Some people don't do it, and they end up going in bad weather unprepared. So always make sure you check your local news or radio stations. If you've got it now, the internet's a good way to check the weather to where you're going to be traveling to see what it's going to be like. So that way you can prepare, leave early, make extra stops if needed. Anything that's going to keep you safe while in a storm or whatever you have to travel through. The next thing we're going to show you is how to install tire chains. We have a short video for that. If there's ever deep snow, you want to make sure you're going to use those tire chains. You're going to have them in your truck. Along with other things you need to have in your vehicle is a fire extinguisher, first aid kits, and you want to make sure that you have a jack so that way, just in case there is a flat, you'll be able to change your tire. And next we're going to show you how to install the tire chains.
Take the chain out of the bag and lay it down on the ground. Release the red tensioning chain from the spring-loaded ratchet. Separate the side chain from the flat red plate and undo the male-female fitting which connects the two pieces of cable together. Untangle the chains. Lay them out in front of the tire as shown, with the split at the base of the tire so that it can fit the tire without moving the vehicle. Neatly lay it out so that it's totally untangled. Okay. Slide the chain behind the tire as shown so that the one end of the cable appears on the other side of the tire. Pull that out. Once again, untangle it on both sides of the tire, allowing the split of the chain to form itself around the base of the tire. Standing in front of the tire now, pick up the blue cable with your left hand, the yellow cable with your right hand. Connect the male-female fitting of the cables on the top of the tire. Push it gently behind the top of the tire. Take the flat red plate connector. Put together both pieces of side chain at the 12 o'clock position on the outside of the tire. Connect the red tensioning chain to the ratchet tensioner. Pass it through the tensioner. Pull it as tight as possible. Pull the rubber tensioner on the red tensioning chain through the loops on the side chain. Pull the chains once again, as the tensioning chain as tight as possible. Pull it diagonally so that it's tight. Hook it on the outer side chain. Move the vehicle at this time about 15